Hey, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We know your time is valuable and that you've chosen to spend the next hour or so with us. We made this webinar a little bit longer than the others because we don't like to go long. So we gave ourselves an extra 15 minutes just in case we go over because we like to talk. So thank you so much. Teresa and I have been living and breathing and eating boundaries for the past few weeks, actually all the time, but really I would say on steroids the past few weeks, because we've been preparing for our all new and improved course, Boundaries for Beautiful Relationships, which begins this coming Sunday. We began with a 5-day summit where many of you experienced major shifts in boosting your boundaries. So tell us in the chat room if you were in the summit. Let us know. We had so much great feedback, right, Teresa?
It's amazing that people can have such a great breakthrough in a short amount of time. And it really goes to speaking to the power and boundaries.
Oh yeah, amazing. So then we led a masterclass on the 5 biggest boundary mistakes and how you can turn them around and live your most boundaried life. And let us know if you were there. That was just, when was that?
Sunday night?
Sunday. Yes, I'm losing track. So now we're here at the final masterclass, how to say no without feeling guilty, mean, or selfish. And as always, this is an interactive class, and we encourage you to chat in the chat area throughout the class. If you don't know where the chat area is, it's at the bottom of your screen. If you're on a computer or an iPad, I'm not sure where it is on the phone, but please interact with us. And we are going to open up the lines at the very end to hear you live, ask your questions. So talk to us. We want to hear from you. We don't want to just talk at you. And we also have a gift for you that we are going to give you at the end as well. So get ready to learn about how to improve your ability to say no.
No is a complete sentence. I think Oprah was the first one who said it, and it was popularized, but we don't think of it as something that we can typically use because we get uncomfortable. Sandy and I are going to share with you things, tips, tools, techniques that have come from years, decades really, of working with clients just like you. We both come from different aspects with different areas of expertise, and we have completely different energy. We both have great wisdom. We both are so knowledgeable, but as you can tell, I'm a little like energetic. I'm like the Energizer Bunny, and Sandy is more calm and quiet. So just so you know, if my energy is not something that you relate to or resonate with, it's cool, because half the time you're going to get Sandy, who's like chilling like a villain. So the other thing I want to say is that one thing we've learned from doing this class and this work together is that we've learned how to create powerful partnerships because we set boundaries with each other and our boundaries get better. I get better. I'm a better human being from knowing and working with Sandy. And hopefully she feels something similar. We grow and we grow together. A lot of what we share and what we'll share today are client stories, what we've learned, and also our own stuff. I'm a martial artist and I have a background as a crisis interventionist all through college. And I trained in social work, but then decided not to be a therapist. Sandy has been amazing at helping me share more of my stories. In therapy, you don't talk about yourself. You have empathy and you have compassion, but it's not about you. So Sandy's really helped me. So we'll share stories about oopses and ohs that we've made and how we've learned how to say no. And the other piece that I want to talk about is out in the world, there's a lot of boundary shame. If we don't have it on ourselves, our friends will give it to us, or I've even seen teachers shaming people. You know what you need to say. You should do this. You got to do that. We don't play that. We do not play the boundary shame game. We want you to stand up for yourself in the situations and the places that you can start doing it. It's a practice. And we'll never shame you. We will always celebrate you. We will never shame you. And really, we want to make this down to earth. And we have a really fun way to learn.
We do. And I love working with Teresa. Teresa has helped me improve my boundaries and improve my ability to have more energy. In a good partnership, you both support each other. So we are a perfect example of two very different people who have very similar values and similar ways of relating to people, and in terms
Mm.
of what we believe in. Our beliefs are so similar, which is what I love about Teresa. So we want you to know that you have a right to set boundaries and say no. Boundaries are often misunderstood. They are not something that we do to punish other people. They are there to protect our energy and our health, our emotional safety, and our relationships. And when you don't say no or tell the truth about how you feel in order to protect what's important to you, you can end up feeling depleted, angry, and resentful. So let us know in the chat room if you do this, if you have trouble saying no, if you worry about protecting others at the cost of hurting yourself. We want to hear from you.
I would be raising my hand right now if I wasn't speaking. I am raising my hand. So what is a boundary? I'm going to give you my favorite definition. And I teach this even to children. I've been a martial artist for the last 25 years, and I teach children as well. And so a boundary is really an energy bubble that's around us. If you trust somebody, you can let them into your energy bubble, right? Because you know that you're safe. If you do not trust people, it's perfectly fine to move your energy bubble out. If you've ever met somebody and you instantly feel like you like them, they might have good energy for you. If you met someone instantly didn't like them, they might not have great energy for you. But really, a boundary is all about the energy for you for yourself. Directly saying no and drawing a boundary isn't just about protecting yourself from whatever's outside. It is really about you filling yourself up with what matters to you, what's important to you. And you hear the word self-care all the time. Well, that is actually part of learning how to have a boundary. And when you have solid boundaries, you help people know the real you. Because if you're the people pleaser that says, I don't know, what do you want? How do you want to do this? Okay, what is that? Does that work for you? Then somebody doesn't get to know you and your quirks and your choices. So a little quirk about me is I like to make up things. I made up a little rap song, and it is, a boundary is what you will and what you won't, and what you do and what you don't. What you will and what you won't, and what you do and what you don't. And if you can just remember that, it takes all of that crazy heavy energy out of it. The more honest you are, any of us are, with the people in our lives we care about and about what works for us, the closer our relationships can become. We can create confidence. We can establish our boundaries. We can honor the boundaries for other people. And we can create relationships that really are copacetic instead of codependent or symbiotic or dependent. So we can actually create healthy relationships.
Yep. So why do we struggle to say no? Big question. Many of us have what we call the disease to please. We're people pleasers. And why? Because cultural bias, women are raised to think that sugar and spice and everything nice, that's what little girls are made of. So we're taught to be nice at all costs. And that leads to, pleasing at the cost of yourself. Many of us have grown up in homes where we had to do things for others in order to get love, which led to codependency. Our needs were not met, and we got attention when we did something for our family. I had a client who grew up in a really chaotic home. The place was a mess. Her parents were alcoholics, neglectful, and they would go out and she would clean the house to get a pat on the back at a girl. She'd get a tiny bit of attention. She was like 7 years old doing this. It was so sad. And that was what she was conditioned to do. So in all of her relationships as an adult, she did the same thing. She would please men at the cost of herself until we worked together. So let us know.
She'd date somebody and clean their house.
She would. I have written
Let me just
profiles.
get that for you.
Yeah, right. Let me just clean that. You don't have to do anything for me. I'll just do everything for you. And they don't even realize it. I mean, it sounds silly when you talk about it, but there's no awareness that I am doing so much for you. And then all of a sudden they wake up one day and say, but I'm not getting it back in return. Let us know in the chat room whether you do that, you've done that, whether you've been brought up in a home, right, where you were expected to do things in order to get that pat on the back.
Ugh,
So
yes,
yeah.
I resemble that remark. So why else do we struggle to say no? Scarcity. We worry that someone or the offer's not going to come again. If I say no to a friend, if I don't go on to this event, then they're not going to ask me again. And sometimes we settle because we're afraid something else won't come along. And that's really it. It's scarcity. It's a scarcity mindset that there's only a certain number of cool opportunities or jobs or men or women or relationships or friends. And so we allow ourselves to not say no because we're afraid.
Yeah, actually, today I was just talking to a client who was afraid to let go of men who she was not interested in at all. She was
Mm.
continuing these conversations, and I said, "Well, why do you do that?" And she said, "Because I'm afraid another one's not going to come along." And I said, "Let's take a look at your messages." She had like 30 messages. I said, "There are lots of dudes. Let one go, another one will come," right? So it's just so important to look at it from a place of this doesn't work for me, no, and open to what will work better.
Right. And how many burners do you have on your stove? How many people do you want to keep on the back burner? I mean, really, I've only got, a couple of burners. So,
Yeah. Yeah, you had an example from self-defense classes, right?
oy vey, yes. So, I love teaching self defense. It's something that is my passion and my mission. And I laugh at this now. I thought I had to do it everywhere. So if any of you have a mission or feel like you are called to do something wonderful and amazing, um, who's setting boundaries with that? So I was working at one time I calculated, and it was an exhausting 80-hour week. And I'm not talking about sitting in an office. I'm talking about running a class and teaching a fitness class and then doing a kids thing and then like all day long for 80 hours a week. It was very, very exhausting. And I couldn't figure out why I felt so depleted. Well, I realized I need to start setting personal boundaries. Even though I had this great mission, I didn't need to give everything to it.
You couldn't give everything to it. I didn't think there were 80 hours in a week to work. What did you sleep, like 2 hours a day?
It was a lot. It was not very many.
No, no, that's
And I would get up
exhausting.
and go teach in the morning and then teach until 9:30 at night. It was a lot.
Ugh, not good. So, no creates limits that we're afraid of because we might miss out or disappoint somebody. So, for example, I used to say yes to every invitation I got for weddings, bar mitzvahs, bat mitzvahs. I didn't want to disappoint a friend or a relative. And then when I started setting boundaries, I would picture myself at the event. I would picture how long is it going to take me? How much effort is it going to take to get there? Do I really want to be there? I would picture myself there. Do I know anybody besides my relative, the parents? Like, no, I'm not going to enjoy myself. But it was taking that pause to know what I wanted to say no to without
Mm.
feeling guilty.
Amen, sister. Another reason that we don't say no is that we have an underlying fear of getting kicked out of the tribe. So, what do I mean by that? We are a tribal society and we are all very interconnected, but we're afraid deep in our cellular memory of getting kicked out of being around people who will take care of us, support us in our community. It's like the fear of being ostracized or shunned. Um, and instead of speaking up for what we want, or, oh my God, posting the wrong thing, or saying an inappropriate joke, or imagine all the division right now between people based on who's thinking this and who's thinking that, and what you're supposed to say about this and what you're supposed to say about that. And there can be a lot of fear of speaking up because you don't want to get kicked out of your tribe. You don't want to be ostracized. And so that's a really big reason people don't say no.
Absolutely. I was speaking to a friend this morning and she said, I posted something controversial on Facebook today. It's what I believe in, and I know some people are going to be pissed. So
Mm.
she was willing to take a stand, but she was a little worried about people getting upset. So we have to know our yeses and our nos, which is our next point. We don't always know our yeses because nobody ever asked us or cared about what we wanted. So maybe we spoke up when we were younger or in previous
Mm.
relationships and we got knocked down, we got pushed aside, disrespected. So the truth is, we can't speak our no's until we know our yeses. And please write in the chat room. Nobody's writing here, so we really want to hear from you. Let us know if any of this is resonating. What do you struggle with? We want to know.
We do actually. We love interaction. So why do we feel, the whole name of the webinar is that we feel mean, guilty, and selfish when we set a boundary. Why do we feel that way? Well, the first reason is that we think of people who set boundaries as a certain kind of person. If you're a woman, you might think of yourself as a bitch. Oh, that's bitchy to say that, or bossy to say that. If you're a man, I work with almost equal amounts, men and women. Men are like, I don't want to be a dick. I don't want to be that guy. So we will sometimes not want to be that person because we think of the most selfish, self-absorbed, angry person. That's not a boundary. That's just an angry person. I have a client who started to date somebody and she didn't want to upset the client. I mean, her boyfriend, sorry, when he asked her what she preferred, where she wanted to eat. She always said, I don't know, what do you want to eat? Where do you want to go? And my client was gluten-free and she couldn't eat everywhere. And it took him a really long time to realize she was only eating salads. He just thought she really liked salads. And finally, when she spoke up and said, you know what, this is my choice, he loved it. But her fear was that she was going to make him angry or upset him. So she never spoke up.
We have 2 comments. Thank you, ladies, for commenting. Yay. So Nancy says, I think mean, selfish, and also a fear of scarcity in the past. Thank you for
Nancy.
sharing that with us. Teresa, you want to read Carmen's?
I would love it. Carmen was a people pleaser until last year when she worked with Sandy and I, and she's learned about boundaries and has learned to love them. She didn't say it like that. I did.
We read into the text. Another reason why we feel mean and selfish and bitchy is that we're afraid that setting boundaries causes drama. And here's the truth. When you don't set boundaries, you actually create more drama.
What?
Let me say that again. When you don't set boundaries, you create more drama. And here's how. So I have an example from my daughter's life. She has had several situations with apartments where she's gotten into situations with roommates who were not so great. And part of the problem was they never really set agreements. And so she'd get upset, but I don't really want to say anything. It's going to cause drama. And oh my God, the drama that ensued to the point where she's moved out. She has paid for apartments after she's moved out for 4 or 5 months. I mean, it's been a mess. So set those boundaries, and especially preemptive boundaries. And Teresa and I talk a lot about that.
I like those preemptive boundaries are the ones you set ahead of time. So one of the other reasons we feel mean, guilty, selfish, or bitchy is that we have a coping mechanism about being left out. We have a need for connection, and it can trigger our fear of abandonment. We don't want to hurt other people's feelings. I heard a wonderful example right before this webinar of a woman who set a boundary with a realtor, and she set the boundary because she realized she would walk away. Like, she understood what was at stake for her, and she was ready to leave that relationship if things didn't change. But for most of us, her aside, most of us, we have that need to connect, and we're afraid boundaries are going to keep us from connecting.
Carmen says, that was me. Yes, it was, Carmen.
You outed yourself. Yes, it was.
We didn't want to out you if you didn't want to be outed. And Diana says, yes, people pleasing has been my experience most of my life until recently. Yay, so much better as I became stronger. It's amazing, right? When you stop the people pleasing, you take back your power, you have less drama, you feel a sense of peace of mind. So one of the things that we tend to do is the auto yes. Anybody here just says yes automatically? Let me know if that's you. Where you go, somebody says, can you contribute to this, or can you do this volunteer work? And sure. And then you go, oh my God, why did I say yes? Right? Let me know. Have you ever done that? I have certainly done it. I have done it so many times that it took me a long time to learn to do something different when someone asks for a favor. And that is to take a pause. Just pause.
Mm. I remember when I was running my business, I'd have people ask me oftentimes if I could meet them. And I remember a woman who was starting a wellness center, and she said, "You're a very successful business owner. Will you meet with me?" And I felt like instead of thinking, do I want to? Do I want to train someone else that I don't know? Instead of that being the question, my question was, well, when can I fit it in? Can I fit this in? And I always felt like the thing you're supposed to do is to say yes when people ask you. And I, even if it was a like a lunch, you know, I would do public speaking and people would be like, "You're so fun, I want to go to lunch with you," and I'd be like, "I'm exhausted, but okay, how's Wednesday?" And instead of thinking like, do I want to get to know this person, do I want to, I used to fall into this category.
It comes up all the time, right? I mean, and I, as a podcast host, I get asked a lot for people to be on my show, and I have to say no a lot. I've had people who I said yes to who canceled the last minute more than once. And the second time, it was like, okay, the first time, maybe it's an emergency. Second time, shame on me
Mm-mm.
if I say yes, because now I'm at somebody else's mercy. So just pausing and saying, I don't need to say yes to every single person who comes in. That's just not healthy. So we need to establish our yeses so we can say no without guilt, right?
Right.
All
One
right,
of our
we've got some
best
more.
yeses is time. So it can be not picking up the phone all the time. It can be leaving your phone on vibration. Did you know that a strong phone ring will actually spike your cortisol 30% in a second? So I always leave my phone on vibrate and then I check it when I need to. But also being on Facebook or feeling like, and more so before COVID, feeling like you had to be 24/7 accessible and people had to be able to get information from you or response for you. And I even struggle with it. Sandy knows I try to shut down all my electronics by 9 o'clock at night. But sometimes we'll get a text about the course or we'll get an email about the course and it's 9:45 and I'm not supposed to be on email, but I want someone to be handled. I feel like my stress builds up if somebody is not okay. So time is a good one. And my example of turning off electronics, 9 p.m. Phone is an airplane.
Love it. And I keep mine on vibrate too. It's so true though. When you hear that shrill ring, it's, ooh, I get that with my doorbell too. It's like a, ooh. And Nancy says, when being evaluated as a teacher, they count how many times you pause for responses and how long you pause. Oh, that's excellent. I've learned to pause and wait. That's beautiful. And sometimes we can do this in parts of our lives, like we can do it at work, but we can't do it in our personal relationships. And so we have to really look at all those things when we're talking about our time, because our time, I say this all the time, precious. We don't get it back. Our time, our energy.
Energy.
And another place that we don't always say no is social media. And it's pretty broad here, and I'm going to talk about accepting invitations, and it could be work invitations. A lot of times, man, on LinkedIn, I get, "Hey, would you like to connect?" And all they really want to do is sell me something, and I'm like, "Bye," reported
Mm,
as spam. But in dating, often people will say, "Hey, I friended you on Facebook," and you're like, "Wait, we haven't even gone on a date yet." Or I separate out social media from my dating life. And so that's a boundary. And it's something that you need to determine before you even get into a dating situation or a work situation. And when you have your boundary, you can say it so clearly. "Thank you,
mm.
but I keep social media separate from my dating life. It's one of my boundaries. I hope you understand." Person either accepts it or doesn't.
You're so graceful. In our course, we talk about module 8 is how to be a boundary ninja. And it is all about learning how to have grace, say those boundaries with grace and not freaking out. Another established yes is your environment. How much sleep do you need to function well? What kinds of foods do you need to eat that support you? What kind of movies do you like to watch? How much news do you want to watch or don't watch? How much alone time do you need? I can't remember which module it is in our course, but we cover a great deal about your operating manual. So when you figure out how you work best, then you can say your yeses. So you say yes to the fact that you, like for me in the time, I shut off my electronics, and I'm easy with that. So if I'm friends with somebody, or somebody's in a 911 coaching situation, they already know 9 o'clock, I'm shut down. And then I can function better and best.
It's such an important thing to know what you need to operate best. Yeah, I love the operating manual, and it's so enlightening. It's like then you can unapologetically say, this is what I need. Another area is work, and we don't always have the right agreements. And I'll tell you that my son just went through something, and he's kind of in a bad place right now because of it. And it's not totally his fault, but he works for a company that he hasn't really had to work, but he's gotten paid for the last couple months. And they asked him if he'd like to do customer support. They would send him a beautiful computer, and he'd be able to work from home, and maybe even work from home when the store opens up again. So he thought that'd be fun. Well, he got on a call to find out what that meant after he already said yes. And what they said was, you need to work like 35 hours a week, sitting and answering calls. And his other job, he barely worked at all. And you really won't be able to stay home once the store opens again. And he was like, why would I want to say yes to this? This sounds horrible. And he tried to get out of it, and they're telling him, yeah, no, I can't really get you out of it. So he's dealing with this now. But it's that when you don't have the agreements beforehand, and you don't communicate clearly, and you don't know how to ask the right questions, you often are not happy with the results.
And really, the answer to all of this, knowing your yeses, is truly to learn how to know yourself, learn what works and doesn't work for you. Becoming familiar with what makes you comfortable and uncomfortable. When I teach self defense, I teach people that although something might be a red flag, you need to pay attention to it. Although it might seem like a little red flag or a pink flag, you have to pay attention to it. And even feeling uncomfortable with somebody. I've worked with clients who have felt very uncomfortable around a boss, a coworker, on a date. And we have to learn how to listen to that and not shut down that intuitive part of ourselves, because that is really there to protect us. So when you learn how to understand your adrenaline and energy, then you learn more about yourself. You know that if you are confronted, you freeze. And by the way, freeze is our literally first mammalian response. If you think about fight, flight, or freeze, freeze is what most of us get stuck into. But also, if back in tribal days, when there was a bear or a tiger, you needed to decide, should I run or should I fight the tiger? And so freeze was one of the first responses. So I know a lot of us feel guilty, or we shame ourselves about, oh my God, I didn't do anything, I was frozen. Yes, but freezing is the first response that came out of our sort of our systems. And then from freezing, we went to fleeing. And then if we couldn't get away and we were backed into a corner, we would often fight. That is not the same for everybody. And sometimes it might be a boss or a coworker and you freeze, but with your parents or your siblings, you fight. And so it's not always the same. Fight, flight, or freeze is always the same. But if you start to understand your own system and how it shows up for you, you then can work with it. And then you will know what you will and what you won't, and what you do and what you don't.
I just want to say that a lot of you don't know Teresa well, but she is brilliant. And I am so impressed with your knowledge of adrenals, because that's one of your specialties, neurolinguistic programming, social work, therapy, martial arts. You've got so many different aspects to who you are, and you bring all of it to your teaching, which I love. I think it just adds so much.
Sandy?
You're welcome. So how do we say no and end the auto yes? Well, you can freeze. So I think, what's interesting about the freeze is that freezing is taking a pause and then recovering And our pauses can be any length of time. They can be a minute if we have a quick recovery time. They can be 24 hours if we need more time. But pausing instead of just saying yes and then regretting gives us the space to process and breathe.
That's gold, Sandy. Freezing is pausing. That is gold. And for any of us who ever felt guilty or upset that we did not act and we froze, know that you were pausing. And if you were in Nancy's world, you would get graded well for freezing.
Absolutely. So Teresa, do you have you were going to share some scripts for how to give that pause?
I first have to say how much I love scripts. First, I actually have to say how much I love working with Sandy. How much do you love working with somebody who thinks you're brilliant? Yes to that. Thank you. But Sandy and I came up with some great scripts in her brain, man. The way that she works as far as and dating and relationships, but so much more than that. We found that for most of our clients, especially if you're in adrenal overload, you can't think. So when you're freaked out, you're not going to do math. And thank God the tigers or, the bad guys don't jump out at you and ask you how to calculate, how many numbers of pi do you know? My point is you can't get creative when you're freaked out. And oftentimes we're very triggered when our boundaries are pushed up against. We call them a boundary breach or someone crosses your boundaries. So we have created some scripts, and these are also gold. So these scripts will help you should you ever need to set a boundary and you're not sure how to do it. And I have to tell you, even in the self-defense situation, I use the same script over and over. If someone is coming up too close to me or approaching me too closely, I will take my self-defense stance, which is hands up, 1 foot back, and I'll say, hey, that's close enough. What do you need? It's so simple. But every person who means to do me harm then knows that I'm focused and I'm paying attention. So here's a couple of, hey, what do you need? Or that's close enough scripts for you. If someone asks you to do something you don't want to do, instead of the automatic yes, you say, thanks. I got to check my schedule. I'll get back to you. Boom. You know what? I'm busy. I can't check my schedule. Boom. The next one, wow. Let me think about that. I need to sleep on it. I have a 24-hour decision-making policy. So you're not taking the blame. You have a policy.
I love the 24 hours. Give yourself a day. I mean, often when you sleep on it, you will have clarity. You'll be able to focus. Another one is, I need to check with my spouse or my sister or my roommate or my friend before committing. So, sometimes like it's a big expense and you need to make sure, or, you're not sure what other people have scheduled. So you might need to check a family calendar. So I need to check on that. And then the last one we're going to share with you is, I will need to get back to you on that, but thank you for thinking of me. So you always want to be gracious. That's that ninja level of grace. And I'll need to get back to you on it, but thank you so much for thinking of me.
I do love that. So just some final tips to round out the content, the portion that we wanted to talk and teach you about. Define your yeses so you can define your nos. Know your nos. Start setting simple but firm boundaries with just a graceful or a neutral tone. Boundaries are always about practice. Be sure to prevent any anger or upset with someone. So if you have to have a difficult conversation, get with your coach, find a therapist, talk to a friend. Hey, can I vent this out with you? Preventing is venting something with someone else, so it prevents you from going over the line. If you've got a coach, that's great, a therapist, a friend, but instead of reacting in anger to a crossed boundary, find someone to prevent, to go through that conversation beforehand.
I love that. Never thought of prevent as preventing. That's brilliant.
I make words up.
I love it. I will tell you that so many times I'm on a call with a client and they are judging the words of a man, especially just in a typed message, to be something that it might not be. And so by just talking it out, oh, he barely took any time to write to me. So obviously he doesn't care. Obviously he's lazy. Obviously and so we don't know those things. And having someone to kind of mirror back and reflect and help you to really get to the gist of what is the issue and what is that need that's not met. And we do a lot of this in the course. We help you to break it down, talk about feelings, needs, you know, there's so much to say, but I'm not going to say it all. So you want to also be simple and direct in your language. And remember that you don't need to convince anyone of anything. We often think that boundaries mean we have to convince them that we're right and they're wrong. And that's really not what a boundary is at all. So let's talk about what convincing sounds like. And I'm going to talk about going to my mom for a walk, a socially distanced walk, and convincing her, because she wanted me to come up and come into her apartment and sit with her, and I wasn't comfortable with that. So convincing her would be, you know what, Mom, you're really wrong. You shouldn't allow anybody in your house, and I'm not going to do that. Not convincing sounds like, I would love to see you. I'm not comfortable going into your home, but what I will do is meet you downstairs, go for a walk with a mask on, and then I'll drop you back off at your home. You see the difference in the energy between the convincing and stating your boundary. What works for you?
Can I add another convincing one that I see a lot?
Sure.
So when when we get better at setting boundaries, we kind of go overboard at the beginning. Not any of you guys, of course, but sometimes people will go overboard, and they'll say, I'm setting a boundary, and here's what I want to explain about why I want what I want, and this is what I want you to know about the thing that I really, really want. And it's as simple as saying, this is what I want or don't want. But oftentimes we get caught up in over explaining the reason why we don't want to go to a certain movie, a certain restaurant. It doesn't matter. It's okay just to not want that.
I love that you brought that up, because it also weakens our position when we over explain. It means that we're still trying to figure it out, and we apologize for it a little bit, and we just tell you it's really important. So don't be defensive. Don't be aggressive. Don't say too much. And it's okay if somebody doesn't like what you want. It's your life. And it's actually really good news when you hear, you know what, that doesn't work for me. Okay, well, then it's not going to work. No harm, no foul. And if you get somebody who keeps pushing back on your no, that's good information for you about whether you want to stay in that person's life. It's maybe not a good idea to stay with them.
It's all about how people treat you, especially when you set a boundary. And it's a vulnerable time when you set a boundary. And how someone treats your boundaries is a lot about how they treat you. Having respect for your boundaries means they respect you. And I know all of this sounds really simple, but don't be fooled. It's not easy. That's why we really created a course to help guide people through the process, so you can master, anyone can master the boundary setting and keeping. Sometimes we'll set a boundary, we won't keep it. And we can do that. We can set boundaries, we can use grace, we can use kindness, and we can use choices. We have such a cool trick. It's not a trick. It's a tip on how to use choices when setting boundaries, but you can do it without feeling mean or guilty or selfish.
That is correct. So for some of you, what we're sharing tonight is great and it's enough, and you're going to take whatever tips you learn, you're going to go with it. But some of you may want to go even deeper, and that's why we created this course. It is jam-packed with all these tips and tricks, and we go deep. This is not surface stuff. So I'm going to put the link to the course. We're not going to go into all the details here, because that's, just you can find out on the course page. But just know that it is intimate and small, unlike other courses out there. You do get our private attention during our weekly live Q&A calls on Thursday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Mountain Time. And during this eight-week program, you will finally be able to understand why you've struggled in the past to set boundaries, because you'll know, what's your boundary imprint? What made you get here? And then you'll learn how to create those healthy, safe boundaries through our step-by-step unique framework. I also wanted to share our free gift, and then we're going to
What?
open for
Got a
Q&A.
gift? Y'all got a
I got a
gift?
gift. So we have a free gift. We shared it last time, but it really is great for this particular webinar. And we're going to send it out again tomorrow in our replay.
So
But
this is
it's
just a
called
picture
Boundaries
of
in
it. You
Your
guys
Back.
will also get it.
Yeah. Boundaries in your back pocket, how to say no without causing conflict. So these simple scripts, and some of them, we shared a little bit about how to take the pause, but that's not going to work for me. I'm not comfortable with that. Can we talk about it? No, thank you. No is a complete sentence, like Teresa said tonight. So having these at the ready is going to prevent so much heartache for you in the future. So I'm going to just stop sharing so we can open up for your questions. And before we do that, I do have one question from somebody who sent a question in. And her name is Georgie. And she said, "Hi, ladies. I really struggle knowing what my emotional boundaries are. I realize this is linked with my self-worth. But are there any tips or tricks that you could recommend to help me get clarity on my boundaries?" Teresa, would you like to take that one?
Yes, Georgie, thank you so much for asking. We have many tips and tricks in the course, but also hopefully so you've watched this webinar. The first thing is when you are triggered, your emotions are going to do something in your body, and it's up to you to figure out what do they do. So an emotional boundary cross feels a certain way. It might feel like anxiety, stress, anger. I don't know. Every one of us is wired slightly differently. So for you to figure out what in your body alerts you to the fact that a boundary has been crossed. So the only way we can start setting boundaries is to become alert to when they're crossed. We could walk around setting all these preemptive boundaries all around us, but then they kind of look like walls, right? Not a bubble. So figure out what is bugging you. What is causing something in your body? Get familiar with that feeling, and then look at what's a situation. In our course, we talk a lot about values. It's really important to understand your values and your needs, because then you can start understanding, oh my God, I feel disrespected. I feel like that person isn't respecting my time, my whatever. And then that's a real issue for you. Anytime you feel disrespected, you'll have an emotional response. So really, Georgie, feel that feeling. A feeling's job is to be felt. It's in the title. So figure out what that feeling is, what the circumstances are, and then start learning this, even just taking some of those simple scripts.
Those are great tips. And I want to add to that, that most of us really have no idea what our feelings are. And it's okay. When I started this work, I couldn't name an emotion other than maybe mad, sad, glad, right?
Mad, glad, sad, bad. That's
Right.
what the little boys at the martial arts school used to say. How do you feel?
Right.
Mad, bad.
Right. That's like a 5-year-old emotional intelligence was about what I had. Because we spend our whole lives being told, shh, it's all going to be okay. Don't feel that. No, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I don't want to hear about it, and push down feelings and so much discomfort with emotion. We don't know how to be present with somebody. We don't know how to be present with ourselves. And so we spend a lot of time in our course helping you identify, what am I feeling? What am I needing? And I had a discussion with one of my clients this week where she was really triggered by a friend having a discussion about anti-racism with somebody who was a staunch Republican and thought that people were overreacting. And she shut down. And so we talked about what need of hers wasn't met. What was she feeling? And all she could say was she was racist, or she was this. And so that's where we usually go. We start labeling somebody. They're wrong, I'm right. And then we can't have a conversation because we're too polarized. So we have to get clarity. Why did we feel this way? Why were we so triggered? And once we have that, it's so much easier to set those emotional boundaries.
Dude, that was a mic drop. Awesome. So we wanted to open it up to you guys. also to see if you had any questions or boundary situations that you wanted some professional guidance on.
Yeah. And it's really hard to do this on our own. I'm telling you that, Teresa and I both spent so long trying to get the right kind of guidance, reading books. I even got an email today about one of the boundary books. Do I think it's a good book? And I think it's an okay book. It's the one by Cloud, right?
Oh, the Christian one. Yeah.
Yeah. So my issue with that book is it's highly Christian. It's got quotes all over the place from the Bible, and it took away from the content for me a little bit. I wanted a pure boundaries book, and I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it, and I haven't seen a course like the one we offer either, with the kind of information and knowledge base that both of us bring. And so that's really why we do this, because we needed something that we didn't get. We spent so many years trying to get this information and curate it all together in one place. You don't have to spend years trying to master this. You can do it in 8 weeks, which is amazing. So questions, comments?
If no one has a comment or a question, I do have a story.
Okay.
So when I was a little kid, I was very protective of others, and I did not know one whit about how to stand up for myself. I would protect another human being. In self-defense, I call it the mama bear effect. I don't call it, it's called the mama bear effect. But it took me a long time to realize I didn't have any power and I couldn't speak up for myself. And so when I started looking for books, and I'm like 10, 11, 12, 13 years old. And the first book I found was Leo Buscaglia, I think. And it was maybe about healing your inner child. And I was really struggling, and I knew I was struggling, but there were no resources. There were no coaches. There were no teachers that taught you how to take your power back. There wasn't anything out there. And so really the reason that this work is so close to my heart is I never want anyone to have to feel like that. If anyone's struggling with boundaries or feeling disempowered, or like they feel belittled or demeaned, or even a toxic or in dangerous relationships, I want to be that resource for them. And Sandy and I really created this course to help people, and these webinars too, right? Like we're doing these masterclasses, these webinars, so that people can learn, because we do better when we set boundaries. So often women will play small, not shine our light, not speak up. And oh my God, the amount that we have to give. We have so much to give, but sometimes we shut ourselves down, and that's like a boundary, a negative boundary almost, because you're not asking for what you want, you're not being who you are. And that's really one of the biggest reasons that I want to see everybody take this work or learn these things.
I so agree with you, and I love your evolution and how you got here. And I think that's why I connected with you, because I felt disempowered most of my life and had no idea how to find the resources that I needed. I was in a bad marriage for 23 years where I was belittled. I was in jobs where I was put down and told, oh, you'll never get anything like, better than this. So I don't know why you would ever leave. And I was treated terribly. And I remember that feeling in my gut, in my heart, like, I don't want to be like this. I don't want to feel like this, but I don't even know what to say. I would get flooded with emotion because I couldn't name my feelings. I just would be shut down and then walk away with like my face red. And I hated that feeling. And so just to be able to take your power back, let us know if you've ever experienced any of this, if you've been disempowered, if you've been put down, if you have felt like you didn't have the right words to say, especially in the most vulnerable places, like your relationships with men, in a job where somebody in power put you down. I mean, I had an issue with my rabbi calling me, telling me something that was insulting, and I told him. I that after doing this boundary work, I said, you're insulting me. And I walked away from work I was doing, volunteer work I was doing at the synagogue, because of the way he treated me. I didn't have the courage to do that before.
And it's not that we don't have issues come up now. I am in a self-defense company. I founded a self-defense company with a gentleman, And he gets so excited sometimes when we have meetings, and we've been doing them on Zoom lately with other people, and he interrupts me. Any woman out there who has ever been interrupted continuously, you know how we feel about it. And I care deeply for this guy, and he listens to my boundaries, but I was so triggered. I was so mad. But when I had the conversation with him, I explained, hey, I get that you're really excited, but you completely cut me off. And at one point, I even raised my hand and said, hey, I'm not done yet. Hey, Bucko, I need to keep with this thought. But people don't often realize they've crossed our boundaries until we let them know.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's great that you have that tool now, that you know how to set the boundary and to just say, hey, I'm not done yet. I mean, most women don't have those tools. Most men don't have those tools, and it's our mission to help you help yourself,
Help
to,
you, help you. Let me help you, help you. Yeah.
yeah. So if you don't have questions, we'd love to hear your takeaways. And if you can unmute yourself, we'd love to hear your voice. And if you don't feel comfortable unmuting, please post in the comments. So tell us,
Yeah.
what are you taking away from today? Because when we speak it out loud, we actually could do something about it. It anchors it.
Yeah, it anchors in.
It's a quiet bunch tonight.
I love it. Interesting fact, fun fact. When we did this, and please let me know if you want to speak. I will stop talking. When we taught the masterclass on Sunday, interrupting became a really big thing. And for most women, we don't know how to deal with it. We get triggered, we get upset, but it happens over and over. And I almost wonder if the person who's interrupting doesn't realize they're doing it. It's just their communication style.
I think often they don't know, and that's why we have to speak up. I mean, it happens a lot in dating where a man will get on the phone for the first time and just talk about himself. I just had a call like that, and the guy kept apologizing, but then doing it again. And so knowing the art of interruption is huge. It's huge, to do it in a kind way, because otherwise the person walks away, has no idea who you are. They know very
No.
well who they are. They know you're a good listener, but you didn't really leave an impression, right? You didn't really leave him wondering why he would want to ask you out again, except for being a sounding board, which I hope that you don't want to just be that, because that's a codependent relationship. Jasmina, we got a question set. How many times I have been bitchy because I didn't set boundaries? Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so that's a good point, Jasmina. Thank you for sharing that, because often we keep everything in and we tell our friends, we vent to them. Wow, could you believe that guy did that? Can you, ugh. But do we actually say it out loud? And do we say it to that person? And do we say it in real time when it's fresh, when it's new? It's hard to do. And so, we talk a lot also in the course about things like triangulation and drama triangles and other ways that people suck you into a situation that creates more drama, where you have to set a boundary. And, like in families, this happens all the time, where, one family member will say, could you believe what your brother did? I can't believe what he did. And you're like, this isn't about me. I don't want to be part of this. But if you don't have the boundary, you sit there, you take it, and you're really pissed off, uncomfortable. Learning how to set that boundary will stop all of that drama, all of that crap.
I wish people understood that for the most part, when you set a boundary, so if you spin a lot in your head, or if you go through what someone said or how an interaction went, setting boundaries actually stops that. And you might every now and then get triggered to a point where you have to feel like, oh, wow, what do I say? Or how am I going to say it? But learning how to set boundaries, it can like instantly deflate that anger. It can instantly deflate because you just know how to handle it. You have agreements with people, and clients at work, even with friends, and it's done. And that we
Yeah.
talk about preemptive boundary setting a lot in the course, but preemptive boundary setting is knowing those situations ahead of time. where you're going to need a boundary so you don't get bitchy, so you don't get overwhelmed, so you don't feel taken advantage of. Anybody in this group ever felt taken advantage of because they were an overgiver? Anyone else work the too many hours a week thing? But having that ability to set boundaries ahead of time, oh my God, it, I'm not saying it's 100% grace and ease, because something will still trigger me and I might run it by Sandy, like, hey, how would you handle this? But it's so minuscule compared to, I think, how I used to live my life, worried I was going to say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing, piss people off. And finally found, thank God I found boundaries, and started teaching them, working with them and teaching them 20 years ago. I was kind of a mess before that, little hot mess.
Me too. I just want to also share a quick story about you and me. A couple years ago, when we did our very first webinar, we were recording it, and after we recorded it, there was a huge misunderstanding. I had said things that I wasn't supposed to say, that I hadn't planned to say, and Teresa reached out to me afterwards because she was upset, and she had every right to be. And because we have a great relationship, we were able to work it out. We actually made the webinar even better because of our disagreement. And that's usually what happens. It's like what Carmen shared before about her realtor. Locking horns, but being able to set new agreements helps you have a better relationship and a better outcome. And so we were able to talk things out with kindness, without any animosity. And we did it in real time. I mean, you reached out to me. I said, let's get on the phone. Let's talk this out. Let's redo this. And we were able to repair. And so that's what boundaries do. They help us bridge that gap, right? You were talking about the bridge. Yeah. So speak to that a little more, the bridge, Teresa.
When you're upset, you're very vulnerable, and we're triggered oftentimes. And then the other person becomes almost an object. We objectify someone else. And I don't mean like sex object or anything like that, but they become an issue. They become an obstacle. They become a thing. When you open your heart and say, this isn't working for me, or I'm upset because of this, and then you open your heart to let that person see, if they respect your boundaries, like Sandy did when we did that first webinar, she was so gracious. Oh my God, I can totally see that. I can see why you'd be upset. We created a bridge. We've bridged our hearts together, because opening up, setting a boundary is vulnerable. You get less, what's the word I'm looking for? Not triggered, but less emotional about it over time. It becomes more, I have an agreement about this. I turn my phone off at 9. It's not a big deal. But in the beginning, especially if it's someone you care about, we can get very emotionally invested in that boundary set. We need to have a conversation. Is now a good time? What I really want to share is how I'm feeling. And it becomes this thing. Eventually, over time, it isn't quite as difficult. But when you're that vulnerable and you open your heart to someone, they have the opportunity to connect to you and you to them, much like Carmen shared with her realtor.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a client recently who was rehearsing with me a conversation she was going to have with her boyfriend. And as soon as I asked her what she wanted to say, she shut down because she became other focused. She thought about him, what his response was going to be. She thought that he was going to shut down. So she shut down, and we hadn't even, I mean, she wasn't even in front of him, but she's been so accustomed to having to suppress her needs and take care of everybody else, that when it comes to a conversation, she wasn't able to get it out without feeling shut down. And so I was able to get her back into center, which is something we also cover in the course, how to center yourself when you're triggered. And then you can process, and you can be me focused, which is where you have to be when you set that boundary. So what Teresa said, like being able to do it without all that adrenalized, where I'm so scared, but it takes time, it's a practice. This is a practice, I still get scared sometimes when I set a boundary, but that vulnerability can also be endearing, and letting somebody know, I'm kind of scared to tell you this. That's okay, but having guidance is so important. I can't stress that enough. Anytime I've hired a coach to help me through tough situations, it has helped me so tremendously to save so much time and energy and also shame. Like,
Mm.
to carry shame, like I can't do this by myself and I should be able to do this by myself. No, we couldn't do it by ourselves, right?
I have a client, I did a boundary workshop, and the we were going through the rules, or the 1, 2, 3, 4, and my first one was know your needs. And she raised her hand and she's like, excuse me, how do you know what you need? And I looked at her and I said, well, how do you determine when you need something? She's like, I don't know what that means. And she was a tech company. She worked for a tech company, and everyone else came first. She's in her 40s and had never thought, what do I need? She had to make sure that the engineers had what they need, and ops had what they need, and all these other departments were running smoothly. And then her boyfriend was taken care of, and her son was healthy. And then if there was room or energy left over, she might do something with it. But not once had anyone asked her what she needed. So she didn't even have those skills. So we really worked on, just like we do in the course, what are your needs? What are the things that are most important to you? No one, for most of us, I think Sandy said it earlier, no one's asked us.
No one's asked us, and we were taught, don't take care of yourself first, take care of everyone else. Let us know in the comments if you can relate to any of that. I talk to my oldest daughter all the time about this because she has 3 little kids, and it's so hard to take care of her needs, but I can see it and she can see it now. When she neglects her core needs, her basic biological needs, eating on time, eating well, exercising every day, taking time for her, resting, getting enough sleep, those core things, if those are not taken care of, she's short-tempered, she gets a headache, she feels horrible, it's a miserable day. She's learned to take care of her needs. She's learned to get out and exercise. She has learned to get her sleep, to ask her husband to do more. These are all things that we need to do. I was terrible at this. I was terrible at it. And I was walking around depleted and didn't even know I had options. So let us know, have you ever experienced anything like that? I have a feeling there'll be some yeses.
And I also want to flip that. Do you know what some of your needs are? Do you know that you need this much sleep, this much sunshine? I got to say, man, I have not gotten enough sunshine. And Sandy was the one that pointed out. I told her I wasn't sleeping very well. And she said, are you getting outside much? I said, no, I'm doing almost all of my work online and inside. And she said, maybe think about stepping outside a little bit. And it's really helped.
Yeah.
I didn't know I had a need for sunshine or daytime.
Yeah, we can go unconscious. It's very easy to not have a clue, even if you're tuned in. So we need to know, do we need quiet time to recharge? This is such a crucial thing for me, for most of my family. Get that time. I changed the sign on my door from do not disturb because it was up all the time. My daughter said, I don't know if I really shouldn't disturb because when your door's closed, can I knock? Can I not knock? And I said, okay, I need to change the sign to shh, recording. And so there's a new sign on my door, and I'm not going to have it up when I'm not recording. Yeah, my
That's a
needs
great
met.
boundary.
Yeah. Anyway, we are just talking away here and nobody's raising your hand. So one last chance to ask questions. Can we help you with a boundary? Can you tell us what you're taking away from today? Let us know. We know you like to talk when you're not on my webinar here, our webinar.
It might be scary.
Yeah. Well, we're not pushing. We're so happy you came and you showed up because that means that you care about boundaries and you care about improving your life. And so we want to honor you for that, for being here with us tonight. If you were with us at any other part of the summit, of the other webinar, and if you're joining us in the course, we are just so excited about that. And just one last thing about the course is that we have 10 sessions, private sessions with us that are a free bonus. We have several bonuses, but the 10 sessions are almost up, and those are first come, first serves. And those are for you to have private sessions with either me or Teresa. The value is $300 each. And so that is on top of the reduced price of the course this year. So we hope we get you in that course to help you really get those boundaries ninja level.
Amen. And I'm going to go eat some, whatever Nancy's got is making me kind of hungry. So I'm going to go.
You're taking care of yourself, Teresa.
My self-care routine. And thank you so much. You guys could have done a lot of things over the last hour, and you chose to focus on yourself and focus on your boundaries. So thank you and bless you for that, because that in itself is a huge step forward.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night. Bye.